Hi all, my name is Elias Manos and I am a senior GIS student at the University of Connecticut. For the past year, I've been doing undergraduate research in deep learning convolutional neural networks with Dr. Chani Vitharana to support the methodological development of novel remote sensing data processing workflows. So in this exploratory study, we applied deep learning to automate recognition of ice-wedge polygon troughs and human-built infrastructure in the Arctic permafrost landscapes using commercial satellite imagery. Our group here at UConn has primarily focused on permafrost feature recognition using the RCNN, which is an object instance segmentation algorithm. The overall goal of this study was to explore the UNet, a semantic segmentation algorithm, to create an initial understanding of this algorithm's ability to recognize geographic features of the Arctic permafrost from very high spatial resolution satellite imagery. Within the study, we conducted a multidimensional experiment to understand how data augmentation, image preprocessing, and imagery-derived indices improve the performances of the UNet in this application. So firstly, just like any other CNN algorithm, UNet performance suffers when hand-annotated training data is limited. Production of this data is time-consuming and laborious, especially in the case of regional scale mapping applications like permafrost feature recognition. Therefore, we applied image data augmentation to synthetically inflate the size of the two manually annotated training datasets without additional investments on annotation, and determined the optimal augmentation method for both trough and infrastructure recognition. Secondly, image preprocessing methods and imagery-derived indices, such as the normalized difference vegetation index and normalized difference water index, can be applied on input imagery to highlight features of interest and supplement semantic segmentation. Therefore, we selected and applied relevant methods on the training data set to understand their impacts on UNet-based trough recognition and determine which method is optimal. So for trough recognition, we utilized a Worldview 2 image of a selected study site along the North Slope of Alaska near the Point Lonely U.S. Air Force site. For infrastructure recognition, we utilized multiple Worldview 2 and QuickBird 2 images of Barrow and Prudhoe Bay. We designed and utilized a 4-stage workflow for each recognition task. So if I can zoom in here on the diagram, see how close I can get. So as we can see, I don't know if it's showing my cursor, but we can see stage 1, which is input up at the top of this figure where we can see the flow chart. The first stage was input, which consisted of the original satellite imagery and manual annotation of troughs and different infrastructure types based on the imagery. So we considered 4 different infrastructure types: residential, commercial buildings, and public buildings, which were found at the Barrow site, industrial buildings, which were found at the Prudhoe Bay site, and roads, which were found at both sites. Manual annotation, in this case, consisted of drawing polygons over the boundaries of troughs and different infrastructure on the satellite images. So stage 2 then was input preparation. And on this stage of the workflow, we rasterized the annotations and split both the annotation raster and satellite image for a given study site into tiles so that they could be actually fed to the model. The data sets were then split into subsets for training, validation, and testing. Then we applied the selected image preprocessing methods and imagery-derived index functions on the tiles that made up the trough recognition training data set. The selected augmentation methods were also applied to the input tiles in real time as they were fed into the separate models for training, a technique which is known as online data augmentation. Then in stage 3, if I can zoom in anymore, I don't think I can. In stage 3, the UNet models were actually trained, validated, and tested on the input data. So as I mentioned earlier, the UNet is a semantic segmentation algorithm. So it learns to label each pixel of an image with a corresponding class of what is being represented and outputs a predicted mask. So this essentially requires a mechanism for discrimination at the pixel level which is an encoder network, as well as a mechanism to project the discriminative features learned at different stages of the encoder onto the pixel space, a decoder network. So the encoder network, is seen on the left half of the model architecture diagram, applies a series of convolution blocks followed by a rectified linear unit and max pooled downsampling operation to encode the input image into feature representations at multiple resolutions, which ultimately reduces spatial information while increasing feature information. The decoder, which is seen on the right half, semantically projects the discriminative features learned by the encoder onto the higher resolution pixel space to get a dense classification where each pixel is predicted. So this half consists of upsampling and concatenation, which essentially combines the higher resolution feature maps from the encoder network with the upsampled features, followed by regular convolution operations. So for automated trough recognition, we utilized a plane UNet as seen in the architecture diagram, but for infrastructure recognition, we utilized a UNet where the encoder was a pre-trained ResNet with 50 layers, since the segmentation task consisted of 5 semantic classes and was therefore more complex than trough recognition, which was a simple binary segmentation task. So to conduct the data augmentation experiment for both recognition tasks and the image pre-processing experiment for trough recognition, we trained and tested the respective models for each trial of the experiments. So if I go up here to the experimental results, in designing the data augmentation experiment, we applied data warping, which generates additional samples through transformations applied in the data space. And we selected 4 basic non-destructive spatial transformations, which do not add or lose an image's information. And the transformations that we selected are horizontal flipping, which flips an image across its horizontal axis; vertical flipping, which flips an image across its vertical axis; transposition, which reverses the array dimensions and essentially flips an image across its main diagonal axis; and a random rotation of either 0, 90, 180, or 270 degrees. So the experiment consisted of 6 different trials, 4 for each of the transformations applied onto the training data set individually, 1 for all of the transformations combined, and 1 for no data augmentation. These 6 trials were conducted for both trough and infrastructure recognition, and it was found that a combination of the 4 transformations applied onto the training data set is the most effective augmentation method, and that's based on the metrics, the segmentation metrics that are displayed in figures 1A and 1B. So now for the image pre-processing experiment, we applied a number of different methods and filters that could potentially visually enhance trough features in the satellite imagery and ultimately aid the UNet in recognizing them. So we selected 2 different mathematical morphological operators which exploit the geometric structure of an image, and these are the erosion operator, which erodes the bright areas of an image and expands the dark zones, and the black hat operator, which identifies dark objects surrounded by bright objects. Since troughs appear as this linear network of dark objects surrounded by brighter tundra in satellite imagery, these 2 morphological operators were thought to be highly suitable in visually enhancing the original satellite imagery to highlight trough features as distinct objects. Also, we selected high-pass filtering, which has the effect of highlighting boundaries between features, in this case where a trough meets surrounding tundra, thus sharpening edges between objects. In addition, we applied a band averaging calculation to convert the blue, green, and red bands of the original satellite imagery into a single grayscale image, which reduces the spectral complexity of the tundra landscape and again might make trough recognition a simpler task. Furthermore, we selected two imagery-derived indices, as I mentioned earlier, NDVI and NDWI, to test whether information on vegetation and water content can improve trough recognition in any capacity. So this experiment consisted of 8 different trials, 6 for each of the methods applied onto the training data set individually, 1 for all of the methods combined together, and 1 for no image pre-processing. And ultimately, it was found that the black hat morphological operator is the most effective image pre-processing method in enhancing UNet-based trough recognition, while all methods combined together is a close second. As seen in the segmentation metrics that are displayed in figure 2 up here in the top right-hand corner. The grayscale calculation, followed by the high-pass filter and the erosion operator, also yields some performance improvement, while NDVI and NDWI actually offer no improvement over the model trained on imagery with no pre-processing. So finally, after determining the optimal data augmentation and image pre-processing methods, we applied both data augmentation using the 4 combined transformations and the black hat morphological operator on the training data set for trough recognition to train the best UNet model for this task. We applied this final model on an area at the Point Lonely site that the model had not seen before to test its performance on an unseen site. And we can see that in this, this map right here of our model test sites across the Alaskan North Slope. And unfortunately, I can't zoom in anymore, but this site that's in the middle is the Point Lonely area. And we can see the arrow goes to this image right here, which is the area that we subsetted. And this is where we tested that final model. We also applied the best model for infrastructure recognition on an area in Barrow and an area in Prudhoe Bay that the model had not seen. And again, we can see that in this map. Barrow and Prudhoe Bay are on the edges of the coast here, and then we can see the 2 sites that we tested on. So the results from this testing are seen here in figure 3. So in figure 3A and B, we can see 2 zoom-ins on some troughs that have been recognized by the UNet with a high level of detail, and the troughs are in yellow and the background is black. We can also see in figure 3C a zoom in on a group of residential structures shown in red and a road shown in green in Barrow. In 3D, we can see a large public building shown in blue in Barrow that has been fully recognized for the most part, although there are some missed areas and soft edges that could be more definitive, as you might be able to see. In E, we can see a road just outside of Barrow that has been recognized fairly well. And in F, we can see a large industrial building in Prudhoe Bay that has been recognized at a relatively high level of detail, although there's some areas that might have been missed. So to summarize this study, we developed a UNet convolutional neural network-based workflow to automate recognition of ice-wedge polygon troughs in human-built infrastructure with limited labeled training data and high segmentation accuracy. And our findings suggest that overall, the UNet deep learning convolutional neural network, coupled with data augmentation and mathematical morphology, could serve as an accurate and efficient method for mapping both natural and human-built features in the Arctic permafrost environment without compromising spatial details and geographical extent. However, there is some room for improvement. First, the 2 final models that we ended up deriving based on the experiments, should be trained on various unseen areas outside of Barrow, Prudhoe Bay, and the Point Lonely site to gauge transferability and address weaknesses. Second, more manually annotated training data should be created for infrastructure recognition, including data from other settlements, since the model did struggle with, for example, recognizing roads, which should be a continuous linear network. The model had trouble doing that. And finally, we should also add utility pipelines and gravel paths as their own classes in infrastructure recognition, especially in industrial areas like Prudhoe Bay, since these are commonly seen features. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening.